News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's dive straight into the day's headlines. No pressure despite speculation the US might push South Korea to deploy troops to protect the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. A top Seoul official says the topic never even came up during defense cost-sharing talks. Friction over North Korea. South Korea is reportedly urging the US to let South Korean tourists visit the north. Washington's point man in Seoul snaps back, saying South Korea needs to consult with the US before announcing new plans. Plus, another day, another massive trade deal sealed by the Trump administration. The US Senate passes the USMCA in a landslide vote. The deal between the US, Mexico and Canada will replace NAFTA. Now we have some news just coming in. The Bank of Korea has kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 1.25% for the month of January. This follows the central bank's decision back in November of last year to leave rates unchanged. We only just got details on this, so we'll bring you more information during our next newscast at noon Korea time. Now, while the sixth round of defense cost-sharing negotiations between South Korea and the US ended without an agreement on Wednesday, Seoul's chief negotiator says the allies are not discussing the possible deployment of South Korean troops to the Strait of Hormuz as part of their talks. Kim Jae-hee has this report.
South Korea's chief negotiator for defense cost-sharing talks with the U.S., Jeong confirmed on Thursday that the protection of global oil supplies from Iran-related risks is not being discussed between the two allies. Jeong made the comments at Washington's Dulles International Airport on his way back to Seoul after the latest round of negotiations in Washington ended without an agreement on Wednesday. Jeong said while the two sides have broadened their understanding through the course of many discussions, they still need to resolve their differences. He added the two sides are not discussing anything outside the framework of the Special Measures Agreement. While Jeong did mention Seoul has been emphasizing its arms purchases from Washington, he said they're not discussing any specific purchases.
There was no discussion of specific weapons-related projects that are being mentioned in the media or about making payments out of the Defense Ministry's budget.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon says some of the money from the cost-sharing deal will flow back into the South Korean economy. The chief Pentagon spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman said on Thursday that President Trump has been pressuring for an increase in other countries' share of defense costs since he took office, whether it's the Middle East, Europe, or Asia. He also pointed out that some of the money from the deal actually goes back directly into the South Korean economy in terms of goods and services. He gave the example of the hiring of South Koreans who work on U.S. military bases. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the Chief of Staff of South Korea's Blue House says discussions on potential troop deployment to the Strait of Hormuz has seen a considerable amount of progress within the top office. Speaking on local radio on Thursday, No Young-min said that although a decision hasn't been made on dispatching troops to the region, the top office is reviewing ways to protect its nationals and assets there, indicating that consultations are in their final stages. On the same day, South Korea's National Security Council, chaired by the presidential security chief, discussed security conditions in the Middle East and reviewed ways to protect South Koreans and assets in the region. Seoul's top nuclear negotiator says South Korea and the US will closely negotiate on inter-Korean cooperation projects, stressing it's just the beginning of the process. Lee Do-hoon's remarks come after a luncheon in Washington on Thursday with his American counterpart Stephen Biegun. Asked about Biegun's response to possible individual tours by South Koreans to North Korea's Mount Gumgang, he said he has explained enough and will continue talks with the US. On whether Washington understands Seoul's position, he said the US is respectful and stressed that Seoul will continue to work with the US based on that mutual respect. He also said Seoul will seek to avoid any misunderstandings regarding the issue of North Korea's sanctions. Asked about whether any specific discussion on the tourism issue had been held, he said it was too early to talk about. Now, the U.S. ambassador to South Korea is urging Seoul to consult with Washington about its plans to engage with North Korea after all this talk of restarting tourism programs. Lee-Seung-jae with more.
South Korea should consult with the United States about its plans to engage North Korea to avoid any misunderstandings that may trigger sanctions. That's what the U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Harry Harris, said on Thursday in response to President Moon Jae-in's remarks earlier this week that individual tours to the North do not violate UN sanctions, and they could eventually induce the North to return to dialogue and win international support for partial sanctions relief. Seoul's Unification Ministry echoed President Moon's remarks, saying once safety is guaranteed for South Korean nationals, individual cross-border trips can be considered. According to Harris, in order to avoid any misunderstandings, he recommends that everything North Korea-related runs through the Working Group, a task force set up in 2018 to coordinate North Korea-related issues. The envoy also noted that while tourism is not banned under international sanctions, problems can arise, particularly in regards to safety. Seoul agreed that any potential problems associated with sanctions need to be discussed between the allies. South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Lee Do-hoon, explained this week that the fact that the two sides are consulting on the matter shows Seoul respects the international community's sanctions framework. Lee-Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The UN Conference on Trade and Development forecasts the global economy to grow 2.5% in 2020. The world economy expanded by just 2.3% last year. That was the slowest pace in 10 years. The report also said South Korea's economy will grow 2.3% this year, up from 2% in 2019. It also forecasts that the South Korean government will boost spending by 8% this year, which will stimulate domestic demand, especially in private consumption. However, the report said export growth is expected to be sluggish due to the ongoing trade spat with Japan. Google's parent company Alphabet has hit $1 trillion in market capitalization, becoming the fourth US company to reach the threshold after Apple, Amazon and Microsoft. Alphabet shares rose by 0.76% on Thursday on Wall Street, tipping it over the $1 trillion mark 22 years after it was founded. This also comes just over a month after former Google CEO Sundar Pichai was appointed CEO of Alphabet last December, bringing increased optimism about possible changes. Apple was the first company to hit the $1 trillion milestone in 2018, followed by Microsoft and then Amazon. With just 3 months to go until the general elections here in South Korea, the country's rival parties are really getting fired up now into campaign mode. They've been announcing their pledges to provide to the people, should they win, of course. Most of them centre on reducing the financial burden faced by ordinary citizens here in South Korea. Kim Mo-kyun reports.
The race has officially begun. Rival parties have announced their top campaign pledges, aiming to sway the hearts of the voters in the upcoming April 15 general elections. The ruling Democratic Party presented the free Wi-Fi generation as its top campaign pledge.
We chose to expand the free Wi-Fi service as our top pledge. By 2022, we plan to set up 53,000 public access points around the nation.
The party seeks to offer free internet in public transport, schools, traditional markets, and other locations as part of efforts to reduce the public's internet-related expenses, a move they claim is crucial for the fourth industrial revolution. The main opposition Liberty Korea Party presented a set of economic pledges as their top priority.
We should change the economic paradigm to a free and fair one. The economy should prioritize not national interests, but the lives of the people.
The main opposition seeks to come up with legislation focused on strengthening the country's financial stability and on making the labor market more flexible. It also plans to scrap the incumbent administration's nuclear phase-out policy by resuming operation of nuclear reactors and pushing through with planned construction to provide affordable electricity to the public. Meanwhile, negotiations to create a joint conservative party are also ongoing. The so-called Innovative Integration Committee, made up of lawmakers from the main opposition Liberty Korea Party and the newly formed New Conservative Party, held their third session on Thursday to discuss the direction of their possible merger ahead of the elections. And with software tycoon turned politician An Cheol-soo, who was also presidential candidate and co-founder of the 바른미래 Party, set to return to the political scene on Sunday, a fierce battle is expected in the upcoming elections. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
Now, to a contentious issue here in South Korea. The military is considering whether to discharge a service member who underwent gender reassignment surgery while on leave. This rare case highlights the perception that the South Korean military is generally still, to this day, rather unaccepting of soldiers who are either homosexual or transgender. Kim Jeong reports.
A South Korean Army service person having undergone gender reassignment surgery has expressed a desire to continue military service as a woman. According to local media reports, the soldier got the surgery last year in a foreign country while on leave. The Army says the service person is being treated in a military hospital and has been inspected by authorities in pursuant to regulations. A review is underway to decide whether to discharge her or not, since specific rules on whether to allow those who change their gender while in service currently don't exist.
Currently, no such specific rules exist. The service person's physical changes are now being evaluated.
The Center for Military Human Rights Korea argued that the military should accept her request, saying the soldier loves the military and is very loyal to the country. The identity of the service person has been withheld, except that she's a tank pilot serving as staff sergeant that has less than 2 years' experience. The Army declined a request from Arirang News to interview the soldier, which requires the approval by the Army's Chief of Staff. A South Korean military source said one of the most important factors the military will consider in this case is how members of the South Korean military perceive gay and transgender soldiers, who are generally a taboo subject in the military, which is considered one of the most conservative groups in Korean society. Last July, Amnesty International warned that LGBTI soldiers face violence and harassment in the South Korean military due to a 1962 law that criminalizes consensual sex between same-sex servicemen. Violators can be punished with up to 2 years in prison. Asked about such criticisms, Seoul's defense ministry says it's waiting for a verdict from the Supreme Court, which has been asked to consider whether the law needs to be repealed or amended. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, despite impeachment hanging over his head, the trade deals just keep on coming for U.S. President Donald Trump. He does seem to be on a roll in that regard. Just a day after the U.S. and China signed a partial Phase 1 trade deal, the Senate has approved the new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min. Jung-min, tell us more about this massive piece of legislation.
Well, sure, Mark. The revamped North American trade deal was approved on Thursday in a landslide vote by the U.S. Senate. All it requires to become law now is President Trump's signature. The vote for the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was 89-10. The USMCA is a revamp of the 26-year-old deal known as NAFTA. President Trump has blamed the Clinton-era agreement for the loss of countless factory jobs in America to Mexico, where wages are much lower. The revised deal includes tougher rules on labor and automobiles, as well as rules on digital service and e-commerce. The U.S. House passed the bill last month after demanding changes to improve rules on labor rights. The Senate approval came just a day after Trump signed a Phase 1 trade deal with China, and the Trump impeachment articles were sent to the Senate. President Trump tweeted that American farmers are very happy with the new trade deal with China, while mentioning USMCA will be signed as soon as possible. The 5 countries that lost citizens when Iran shot down a Ukrainian passenger plane this month have demanded Tehran compensate the families of the victims. After a meeting in London on Thursday, the foreign ministers of Canada, the UK, Afghanistan, Sweden, and Ukraine said Iran should accept, quote, full responsibility and pay the compensation. They also urged a thorough international investigation. Among the 176 victims on board, 57 people were from Canada, 17 from Sweden, 11 from Ukraine, 4 from Afghanistan, and 4 from the UK. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has revealed this year's inductees. They are Whitney Houston, Depeche Mode, the Doobie Brothers, 9 Inch Nails, the Notorious B.I.G., and T-Rex. Ballots were cast by an international voting body of more than 1,000 artists. They consider an artist's musical influence, body of work, innovation, and more. Houston, the only woman singer to be honored this year, was one of the world's most commercially successful pop singers during the 1980s and 90s. Her legend has lived on since her death in 2012. The 35th Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony will take place in May in Ohio.
Now to some good news for those of you who like a bit of retail therapy. Shoppers visiting South Korea would be interested to know that another big nationwide sale has kicked off. It kicked off on Thursday. It's the 2020 Korea Grand Sale, and it has 5 themes this year: K-pop, beauty, food, heritage, and winter. Through the end of February, foreigners can get deals on all kinds of things, including flights, accommodation, skiing, and cosmetics. That includes discounts of up to 95% on international flights to Korea through 8 South Korean airlines. You have to take note of that, and up to 35% off high-speed KTX trains. Now, keeping up with the rapidly changing times, South Korea's traditional markets are going smart by launching online stores and taking mobile payments. With the Lunar New Year holiday just a week away now, these smart traditional markets are expected to change the way people prepare for the upcoming festivities. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
The store in Amsa Traditional Market in Gangdong-gu District used to be many locals' go-to place ahead of Seollal to get the holiday staple food, rice cake. But now it is selling its rice cakes to the entire city thanks to the launch of an online store. Registered at a special e-commerce site for traditional markets, it delivers products ordered before 1 p.m. in less than 2 hours within the district and within the day for other parts of the city. Despite just going online recently, the store has already experienced the benefits.
In the beginning, there were only 1 or 2 orders, but now we have more than 10 each day. We've seen a steady upswing in sales, and I'm expecting a bigger jump in the future.
This online service is also welcomed by customers, especially during the cold winter season and among busy workers. With just one touch of their finger, they can buy fresh products like vegetables from traditional markets at nearly half the price as in the supermarket. Currently, 15% of the stores at the market take part in the e-commerce scheme, but the number is expected to rise with the market helping stores by offering a joint delivery center. While diversifying their sales platforms, traditional markets are also changing their payment system. Since last October, some stores are taking mobile gift certificates through the online payment system ZeroPay. They say it was adapted to suit people's changing preferences.
Many people come and ask if our shop takes mobile payment. We are expecting this new payment system to boost our future sales.
More and more merchants are joining in this smart transformation. Last year, some 2,700 items from 125 markets were registered on the e-commerce site, which was up a staggering 400% from the previous year. There were some 800 orders through the site last month, which is 5 times as much as 6 months ago. While this growing trend will contribute to revitalizing the local economy, it will also help keep traditions going. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Now, as you may know, South Korea is a very trend-oriented country, and they come and go like the wind. But really, they go in cycles, and retro is back at the moment, and it's all part of this so-called neutro trend now in South Korea. Kim Bo-kyung tells us more about what neutro actually is and how companies are following this trend.
All designs are back in fashion in Korea. Neutral is a newly coined word made by combining the words new and retro. It refers to reinterpreting things from the past. As the neutral trend hits the market, companies have redesigned their product packaging. One company recently launched this new soju bottle based on the design from the 1970s and 80s with a toad character on the front of a clear blue bottle. And consumers seem to like these neutral designs.
We have reinterpreted past label designs to deliver freshness for the young generation, and it is very popular, selling 100 million bottles in 7 months since its launch.
One beer company has used its old bear character and retro-style fonts on its packaging. These designs not only remind the older generation of their youth, but also appeal to a younger crowd who haven't seen these designs before.
We're now eating foods that older people ate when they were kids. I believe these retro-style foods could be a conversation starter between the old and young generation, thus reducing the generation gap.
Food companies are following the neutral trend too. One company has relaunched a type of noodles 30 years after they were originally on the market. Old-time snacks can also be seen on the shelves. A flour company has expanded its market by selling neutral-style goods with their brand character, a white bear.
Tehran Flour has been in business for 68 years, and we thought the brand itself was retro. We believe that retro marketing would attract customers in their 20s and 30s.
The company has been around for generations, but it says this change was needed to survive in the fast-changing market. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning. It was another freezing start to the day, but highs will hover a couple notches above season norms this afternoon. But when the sun goes down, we can feel that winter chill, so dress warmly. This weekend is shaping up to be a mild one, but central regions could have rain and snow for Sunday. Cold wave advisories, however, remain in place for parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do provinces. Readings this morning were just a few notches higher than yesterday there, while dry weather advisories in some East Coast regions have been upgraded to warnings now. But some welcome news for those in the east. There is wintry precipitation in the forecast from this mid-afternoon into tomorrow, but drive with care. Daily highs will range between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius this afternoon, and partly sunny skies are in store for much of the country today. Even after Sunday's wintry precipitation, there should not be any major cold snap to make us shiver. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, on that note, that's where we're going to leave our news and weather for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. a reminder, my daily reminder, that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time. But if we don't see you, have a wonderful and hopefully warm weekend. Until next time, goodbye.
Arirang's news program, The Point, covers relevant issues that are shaping the world, from major political events to local stories here in Korea. The host Daniel and a group of panelists have in-depth discussions with compelling stories to keep